Hello, this is your host from our academy, and in this video we're going to answer one of our students' questions. This student asked us, what is determinism? Well, let's jump right into it. So when we talk about determinism in philosophy, what we're really talking about is free will versus compatibilism. So there are some people who say that determinism and free will are incompatible, that they cannot both be true. There are others who say that they can be compatible. So what do those terms mean? Well, let's start with determinism. Now if you look up the definition of determinism online or in the dictionary, you lines find something like this. Determinism is the philosophical theory that every event is caused by preceding events and conditions, and that everything that happens is a necessary consequence of these prior causes. Now, that's all well and good, but it doesn't really help us much to understand what determinism is. So let's break it down. The idea here is that the future is completely determined by the past. So whatever is going to happen will happen because of things that have happened before. In other words, it's the idea that everything is caused by something else. Now, when scientists say that a theory is deterministic, what they mean is that within the framework of that theory, all events are causally linked together. So you have an event over here, and then that event causes another event, which causes another event, which causes another event, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that nothing happens without being caused by something else. It's the idea that everything has a cause. Now, when we talk about causes, we're not just talking about sufficient causes. We are also talking about necessary causes. So an example of a sufficient cause would be a match striking against the rough surface of a matchstick. So you have a match and you strike it against the matchstick. That causes the match to light. But for that to happen, there also needs to be a little bit of oxygen in the air. You need to have some friction between the match and the matchstick. You need to have the correct chemical composition of the match and the matchstick and the surrounding environment. Otherwise, striking the match against the matchstick wouldn't cause it to light. So there are all sorts of necessary conditions that are required for that event to take place. But if all of those necessary conditions are met, then the event will take place. So now let us think about an example that's a little more complicated than a match striking against a matchstick. Let's think about an election. So let us say that we have an upcoming election and we're wondering whether candidate or candidate B will win. Well, the outcome of that election will depend on a lot of different things, right? It will depend on how many people vote, who they vote for, and even why they vote the way that they do. All of those things contribute to the outcome of the election. Now when we think about the election in this way, it seems like the outcome of the election might depend on all sorts of different factors, and that it might be the result of chance or luck or just random factors. But if we zoom out a little bit and think about the election as being the result of a long chain of events, then it seems like all of those things that might seem like random factors or chance or luck actually had to come from somewhere, and they were caused by something else. So for example, why did candidate A decide to run for office? Well, maybe it's because they wanted to make a difference in the world, or maybe it's because they thought that their opponent was a terrible candidate. Why did candidate B decide to run for office? Well, maybe it's because they wanted to make a difference in the world, or maybe it's because they thought that their opponent was a terrible candidate. Why did a particular voter decide to vote for candidate A? Well, maybe it's because they agreed with candidate A's policies, or maybe it's because they didn't like candidate B's policies. Why did that same voter show up to vote? Well, maybe it's because they thought that voting was important, or maybe it's because they had a friend who reminded them to go out and vote. So all of these things, whether it's the outcome of an election, or whether it's the outcome of a game of chess, or the outcome of a snowball rolling down a hill. If we zoom out enough and think about the long chain of events that led up to that point, it seems like everything is caused by something else. But wait, isn't that just a redescription of the way that the world works? Isn't this just a way of saying that the world operates according to the law of causality? Yes, exactly. So determinism is really just the idea that the universe operates according to the law of causality. But that raises another question. If everything is caused by something else, does that leave any room for free will? Is it possible for anything to just happen without being caused by something else? Well, this question of whether determinism and free will are compatible has been debated by philosophers for centuries. Now, we don't have time to get into all of the different arguments in this video, but there are two main camps. On one side, you have people like Spinoza, who said that determinism and free will are incompatible. So he says that if everything is caused by something else, then human beings are not free to choose their actions, because their actions are simply the result of the prior causes that they were determined by. So if everything is caused by something else, then we are just like robots or puppets, right? We are just like machines that are moving through life without any control over our actions. On the other side, you have people like David Hume and many others who say that determinism and free will are compatible, that we can believe in both at the same time. They say that if everything is caused by something else, that doesn't mean that we aren't free to choose our actions because our choices are still caused by something else. So it's just the idea that everything in the universe is caused by something else. And whether that leaves room for free will or not is still an open question. Okay, so now we've talked about determinism. Let's talk about compatibilism. Compatibilism is the idea that determinism and free will are compatible, that you can believe in both at the same time. So compatibilists say that we can still have free will even if everything is caused by something else. And they say that free will really just means that our actions are caused by our desires and beliefs. So compatibilists often say that free will is really just a matter of psychological causation, that it doesn't have anything to do with the physical universe and whether it is deterministic or not. Instead, it has to do with our own internal states, our own desires and beliefs and the way that they cause our actions. Okay, so now let's think about what this means for ethics. Because one of the things that people worry about when they think about determinism is that if everything is caused by something else, then they can't be held morally responsible for what they do. So if we believe in determinism, does that mean that nobody is ever morally responsible for anything? Well, let's think about this. When we hold someone morally responsible for something, what does that mean? Well, it usually means that we punish them for doing something. We impose some kind of penalty on them for doing something. But if determinism is true, then everything that person did was caused by something else. So if we punish that person, are we punishing them for something that they couldn't help but do? Are we punishing them for something that was caused by something else? Well, that depends on what compatibilists are right and determinism is true. Does that mean that nobody is ever morally responsible for anything? Well, not necessarily. Because compatibilists say that although everything is caused by something else, our actions are caused by our desires and beliefs. And those desires and beliefs are under our control. So if everything is caused by something else, it doesn't mean that everything is uncaused. It just means that everything is caused by something else. So compatibilists say that if everything is caused by something else, that doesn't mean that nobody is ever morally responsible for anything. It just means that we should focus our attention on the internal causes of human behavior rather than the external causes. So it's the idea that when we hold someone morally responsible for something, we're really holding them responsible for the internal causes of their behavior rather than the external causes. Okay, so that's what compatibilism is. Okay, so now we've talked about determinism and compatibilism. Another thing that we should talk about is the difference between strong and weak determinism. Strong determinism is the idea that everything that happens is caused by preceding events and conditions. And weak determinism is the idea that everything that happens is caused by preceding events and conditions within a system. So the key difference here is that strong determinism says that everything is caused by preceding events and conditions, whereas weak determinism says that everything is caused by preceding events and conditions within a system. So why is this distinction important? Well, imagine you have a closed system like a closed box. And inside of that box, you have a bunch of billiard balls bouncing around. Now, if you just look at the system inside of the box, it looks like the motion of the billiard balls is random and chaotic. But if you zoom out and look at the entire universe as a whole, then the motion of those billiard balls isn't random or chaotic. It's caused by the state of the entire universe as a whole. So the key difference between strong and weak determinism is that strong determinism says that everything is caused by preceding events and conditions, whereas weak determinism says that everything is caused by preceding events and conditions within a system. Alright, so hopefully that cleared up the question of what determinism is. If you have any other questions, feel free to post them below. Also, if you want to learn more about philosophy, we have lots of other videos available. Thanks for watching.